There is an old stone convent hidden deep within the mountains of northern Spain, far from the roads tourists travel and far from the towns marked on most maps. The locals know it exists, but they rarely mention it. If someone asks about the convent, the conversation usually ends quickly. If someone asks why the nuns who live there never sleep at night, the silence becomes even heavier. Some people claim it is simply an old religious tradition. Others insist it is connected to a tragedy that happened many decades ago. The oldest residents of the valley tell a different story. They say the sisters remain awake because something walks the mountain after midnight, and if the chapel is ever left empty, it comes to the convent doors. The convent of St. Verena stood on a lonely ridge overlooking miles of dark pine forest. During the day, it seemed peaceful and beautiful. Sunlight reflected off its gray stone walls, wildflowers grew along the paths, and birds nested beneath the roof. Visitors often described it as one of the most serene places they had ever seen. Yet the atmosphere changed completely when the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The birds vanished. The wind seemed to retreat into the forest. Even the insects stopped making noise. A strange stillness settled over the ridge, as though the entire mountain was holding its breath. For generations, the sisters living there followed a strict routine. They woke before dawn, prayed together, worked in the gardens and kitchens, taught local children, and spent their evenings in worship. But unlike other convents, they never retired to their rooms at night. As darkness arrived, every nun gathered inside the chapel. Candles were lit. Prayers continued. No one slept. No one even attempted to sleep. They remained awake together until the first light of morning touched the stained glass windows. This happened every single night without exception. The reason was never explained to visitors. Above the chapel hung an ancient iron bell. According to convent records, the bell was older than the building itself. No one knew where it came from. Some believed it had been recovered from a ruined monastery that once stood in the valley centuries earlier. Others believed it had always been there. What everyone agreed upon was that the bell rang every night at exactly 3:07 a.m. Nobody touched it. No ropes moved. Yet 3 slow strikes echoed through the mountain darkness. The sound could be heard for miles. 3 strikes. Never more. Never less. The bell had rung that way for as long as anyone could remember. In the autumn of 1974, a young journalist named Gabriel Navarro arrived at St. Verena. He worked for a regional newspaper and had been sent to write a feature story about unusual religious traditions. The rumors surrounding the sleepless nuns sounded interesting enough to attract readers, but Gabriel did not believe in ghosts, curses, or supernatural legends. He expected to uncover some forgotten historical event or perhaps a symbolic ritual that had evolved over the years. What he did not expect was that everyone he met seemed genuinely afraid. "Do you intend to stay through the night?" Gabriel smiled. "That is the plan." For several moments, Sister Agnes said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. "Very well." As Gabriel explored the convent during the afternoon, he noticed several odd details. The first was the silence. 23 nuns lived there, yet the building felt almost deserted. He rarely encountered more than 1 or 2 sisters at a time. The second oddity involved the clocks. Every clock in the convent displayed a different time. Some were several minutes ahead. Others were far behind. One large grandfather clock in the library appeared to be running backward. When Gabriel mentioned this to Sister Agnes, she immediately closed the library door. "Please do not concern yourself with the clocks," she said. "They cannot be trusted." The answer sounded absurd, but her expression remained completely serious. Later that evening, Gabriel interviewed several sisters. Each conversation followed the same pattern. The nuns were friendly and willing to discuss their lives, their faith, and the history of the convent. But the moment he mentioned the bell, their faces changed. Some became visibly nervous. Others ended the conversation entirely. One elderly nun crossed herself repeatedly before whispering, "You should leave before nightfall." Gabriel laughed softly. "I'm only writing an article." So was the last man. The nun immediately walked away. Those words stayed with him. The last man? Who was she talking about? When Gabriel asked Sister Agnes, she refused to answer. As sunset approached, dark clouds gathered over the mountains. Rain began falling against the stained glass windows. The sisters quietly prepared the chapel for the night. Candles were placed along the walls. Prayer books were arranged in neat rows. One by one, the nuns entered and took their seats. At exactly 10 o'clock, the heavy chapel doors were locked from the inside. Gabriel found this unusual. Why lock the doors? Sister Agnes looked toward the windows. Because once midnight arrives, nothing enters. And nothing leaves? Yes. The certainty in her voice unsettled him. Midnight came and passed. The chapel remained silent except for whispered prayers and the sound of rain outside. Gabriel expected boredom to set in, but instead he found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable. The atmosphere felt wrong. Every nun seemed tense, as though waiting for something. At 1:13 a.m., one of the candles suddenly went out. No draft. No breeze. It simply died. A younger sister immediately relit it with trembling hands. At 1:47 a.m., a distant knocking echoed somewhere beneath the convent. A pause. Gabriel looked around. The nuns continued praying. No one reacted. The silence that followed felt unnatural. Gabriel walked to a window and looked outside. The mountain was completely still. No animals stirred. Then he noticed something standing at the edge of the forest. Tall. Motionless. Watching the building. Gabriel blinked. The figure was gone. He convinced himself it had been a tree branch or a trick of the darkness. Yet his heart continued racing. As the minutes crawled toward 3:07 a.m., the tension inside the chapel became unbearable. Every nun had stopped turning pages. Every head was bowed. Even Sister Agnes appeared frightened. Then the bell rang. The first strike echoed through the convent like a hammer blow. The second followed several seconds later. The third seemed to vibrate through the stone walls themselves. The sound faded. Silence returned. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A second later, another door slammed. Then another. Then another. The noise spread through the building as though something invisible was moving from room to room. Gabriel stood up. What is that? No one answered. The slamming continued. Closer now. Approaching the chapel. One door. Then the next. Each impact louder than the last. Gabriel felt cold sweat forming on his neck. And it was coming directly toward them. Then everything stopped. The chapel fell silent once more. 2 minutes. 3. Perhaps it was the storm. Perhaps old wooden doors had shifted. Perhaps there was a logical explanation after all. Then a slow scratching sound appeared on the other side of the chapel door. Something was dragging its nails across the wood. Back and forth. Back and forth. The sisters lowered their heads and began praying louder. The scratching continued for nearly a minute. Then came a single knock. 3 sharp taps. Silence. Another 3 taps. Gabriel stared at the door. A terrible feeling settled into his stomach. Because for the first time that night, he realized something. Whatever was outside knew they were in there. And it wanted to come inside. Then the scratching stopped. Silence filled the chapel. A single knock echoed through the room. 3 taps. 3 more taps. The exact same pattern. No one moved. No one answered. Sister Agnes tightened her grip on the crucifix hanging around her neck and whispered a prayer under her breath. Gabriel could feel his heart pounding. "What is outside?" he finally asked. The Mother Superior looked at him. Her face had become pale. "We do not speak to it." "To what?" She hesitated. Then she said something that made every sister in the chapel lower her head. "To the one who waits." Boom. Boom. The old hinges groaned. A younger nun began crying quietly. Yet none of the sisters appeared surprised. They looked terrified, but not surprised. And somehow that frightened Gabriel more than the noise itself. The impacts continued for several minutes before abruptly stopping. Then everything became silent once again. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. The sisters continued praying until sunrise. When the first rays of light entered through the stained glass windows, several nuns visibly relaxed. One even began weeping with relief. The chapel doors were finally unlocked. The morning air felt strangely warm after the freezing atmosphere of the night. He immediately examined the chapel entrance. What he found made his blood run cold. Deep scratches covered the wood. Not shallow marks. Not the kind made by branches. These gouges were several inches long and carved deep into the oak. Some appeared fresh. Gabriel placed his hand beside one of the marks. The scratch was longer than his entire hand. Whatever had made them possessed enormous claws. "You see now," Sister Agnes said quietly from behind him. Gabriel turned. "What is doing this?" The old nun stared toward the forest. "No one knows its name." She remained silent for several seconds. Finally she answered. "The Watcher. The lower archives." The room smelled of dust and damp stone. Ancient books filled wooden shelves from floor to ceiling. Others appeared even older. The Mother Superior placed a leather-bound journal on a table. The cover was cracked with age. "The first record," she said. Gabriel carefully opened the journal. The handwriting inside dated back to 1881. At first, the entries described ordinary convent life. Gardening. Prayer. Repairs. Then the tone changed. One entry read, "Something walks outside after midnight. We hear footsteps circling the convent. Sister Helena saw a figure standing among the trees. It did not move for 3 hours. The bell rang on its own again. 3 strikes. Afterward, we heard voices beneath the floor." Gabriel looked up. Sister Agnes nodded. "There are tunnels below the convent." "Old storage tunnels?" "No." The old woman hesitated. "Older than the convent itself." Gabriel stared at her. "How much older?" "No one knows." That afternoon, Sister Agnes revealed a secret hidden beneath the chapel. A narrow staircase descended deep underground. The stone steps were worn smooth by centuries of use. The air grew colder with every step. None resembled Christian imagery. There were no crosses. No saints. No scripture. Thousands of them. "What is this place?" Gabriel whispered. "The reason this convent was built." The answer confused him. Sister Agnes continued. Gabriel slowly turned. The room stretched far beyond the reach of his flashlight. It was massive. Far larger than the convent above. Then he noticed something in the center of the floor. An iron door. Circular. Embedded into the stone. Chains surrounded it. Dozens of chains. Each one secured with heavy locks. Gabriel approached cautiously. The metal looked ancient. Dark stains covered its surface. What is under there? For the first time, genuine fear appeared in Sister Agnes's eyes. We don't know. The answer sent a chill through him. And what is that? Whatever lies beneath that door wants to get out. That evening, Gabriel examined more records. The oldest document in the archives dated back to 1642. Several sisters vanished during a single night. No bodies were ever recovered. One line stood out. We followed the voices into the tunnels. They sounded exactly like our missing sisters. Yet we knew they could not be real because the voices came from beneath the sealed door. Gabriel reread the sentence 3 times. The voices came from beneath the door. Not beyond it. Not around it. Beneath it. As darkness approached, he found himself looking repeatedly toward the forest. The trees seemed different now. Less like a forest. More like a wall hiding something. The doors were locked. Prayers began. This time he noticed details he had missed before. Several held rosary beads so tightly their fingers trembled. One elderly sister continuously watched the chapel windows. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Midnight came and went. The atmosphere remained tense but calm. The sisters jumped to their feet. Another scream followed. This one closer. Gabriel recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to Sister Lucia, one of the younger nuns. Without waiting for permission, Gabriel rushed into the hallway. Several sisters followed. The screams led them toward the east wing. They found Sister Lucia standing motionless near a staircase. Her face was white with terror. She pointed toward the darkness below. I heard her. Heard who? Sister Agnes demanded. My sister. Lucia's sister had died 5 years earlier. She called my name from downstairs. She sounded exactly the same. Nobody spoke. The watcher had begun calling. Back in the chapel, Sister Agnes finally revealed the truth. At first there were only footsteps. Then came the scratching. Then the voices. The entity beneath Saint Verena learned over time. It listened. It observed. And eventually it learned how to imitate people. A parent. A sibling. A friend. The goal was simple. To lure someone into the tunnels. Several people had disappeared over the centuries after following those voices. None were ever seen again. Why stay here? Gabriel asked. Why not leave? Sister Agnes stared at him. If we leave, who guards the door? The sleepless nights were not a ritual. They were a watch. A vigil. The sisters weren't protecting themselves. They were protecting everyone else. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the bell rang. 1 strike. 2 strikes. The sound echoed through the chapel. Then came something new. A sound no one had heard before. The chains beneath the convent rattled. The noise traveled upward through the floor. Metal scraping against metal. A lock breaking. Then another. The sisters stared at one another in horror. Sister Agnes slowly rose from her seat. Her voice barely above a whisper. It's happening. The rattling grew louder. Far louder. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Gabriel remembered the massive iron door beneath the mountain. The ancient chains. The dozens of locks. And suddenly he understood. For centuries the sisters had remained awake every night for one reason. Because they were waiting for the night when the door finally opened. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the chapel, a sound echoed through the stone. Not a growl. Not a scream. A laugh. A slow, human laugh. And for the first time in hundreds of years, the bell began ringing continuously.